that you do this one last. That's sort of the final content. But if you want to preview this and go back through any other things that you've missed, you can do so. Once again, I'm Jason Prophet from Hunters Lane High School.
I'm Michelle Newcomb from John Overton High School.
When you are done with this module, if you have done the previous 5, you will get you can see the final assignment. This will be a homework assignment, not a quiz. But we're our real focus on this module is to just kind of walk through, for the teacher, what does Capstone look like daily? What are some good tips and tricks? What are ways to kind of to address this very odd but very creative course? And Michelle is going to get us started.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about the first weeks of Capstone. What does it look like, and what are we doing, and what's going on? I usually start with, and of course, it doesn't matter what you want to start with. You're probably going to start with this because the kids are going to make you start with this. They're going to want to know what it is. I heard you have to write a 10-page paper. I heard you have to do this and that. So they have there's lots of rumors that fly around. And what I generally try to do is give them a pretty good overview of the 4 Ps. Not every detail, not every little thing, particularly because in general, we do the paper the first semester, and then all the rest of it is second semester. So I hit on it enough so that they know how the 4 Ps connect to each other. I think that's really important for them to understand, particularly when you're choosing a topic, because you've got to have that product that goes with it. So it's really kind of important that they understand how interconnected everything is. The next thing that I do is deal with technology. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And Jason, go back one more. Sorry. They need to build trust. We do a lot of relationship building. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. All right, so now all of what I'm about to talk about is potentially not going to be a thing. And assuming that the one-to-one initiative announced yesterday is going to actually happen, that'll be interesting to see how that's going to work. At any rate, let's go forward and just some general rules. If you are a person teaching Capstone, chances are you're going to have a dedicated computer cart in your classroom, or a dedicated lab of some kind where students go to use the computers, because it's pretty much daily. Every minute of every day, they need to have that access to that research. So there were 3 big things that I went over with them, and I'll put the PowerPoint in the resources folder as well. Assign a computer to each student and insist that they use the same computer every single day, even though you're going to have to do the round robin, who's got what computer. Hey, where's number 12? I have number 12. Well, that's not your number. Your number is 14. Why do you have number 12? Well, because 14 wasn't in there. Okay, well, give number 12 back. You see, and it just goes on and on and on. It's a pain, but you need to do it. It's very, very important. They will stay in better shape. You will not have nearly as many issues if every computer is assigned to a student and they know to get their number. I print a list and I hang it on the computer cart. So when they do forget their number, they can come up with it. Second big thing, whether we have one-to-one or laptop carts, either way, appoint a couple of tech assistants. Appoint your own classroom TSS in each class to help keep things neat, help make sure computers go back in the cart, help troubleshoot with people who need help troubleshooting, and most importantly, when you're not there, that they will help you take care of whatever technology is in your room so that you don't have to worry about it quite so much. And then I go over never, ever, evers. I got 2 of them and I just like lose it. My head explodes every time I see it. Do not ever, ever let them carry a laptop around by the screen. They got to carry it by the base, because once the screen is popped, it's never coming back. It's a goner. They won't replace it. Screen replacement's far too expensive. And then the next thing I see constantly is charging those phones on the cell phone. I mean, on the laptop battery. Nothing will kill a laptop battery faster than just charging cell phones on it. And that goes for personal computers. And I learned that on the hard way on my very own MacBook Pro. So don't do that. Don't let them do that either. Even if it's, you know, like I said, even if it's one-to-one, some of this stuff still applies. The next thing that I do, actually the thing that I do starting day one is I try to learn their names, keep myself organized, help them with ideas for a topic, and build relationships all at the same time. And when I say build relationships, I mean with me and with each other. I have a printout. I have of course, a big spreadsheet that I can print out every day and do. And on this, I've got 4 blanks for names, and I insert 4 different questions that they have to come in, sit down, sign their name, and then answer those 4 questions every single day, starting from day one. It helps me memorize their names. It helps kind of keep things from becoming social hour. They come in, they find the clipboard with their name on it, and they sit in that grouping of desks. So every day they answer questions, and every day I go around and I collect those papers and I sit down with them at that grouping of desks, and I talk to them and I say, oh, wow, hey, who works at Chick-fil-A? You know, oh, wow, today's biggest problem in society is no flex lunch on Mondays? Really? Do you think so? Conversations like that. And so they are kind of forced to sit with random people. They are kind of forced to talk about things in front of people, which is helpful. And they start to get the idea that I mean for this to be kind of an open communication type of a place to be. And it works out so well. And there's a huge list of sample questions. I don't always get to all of them. I randomize them. Sometimes I move the names around and mix up the groupings, and they come in and they expect to go to the same place and their name's not there, and then they have to find it again. Kind of try to just keep things moving and keep people talking to each other in a focused way the first few weeks. It's been very, very helpful to me. And then later you can take all those sign-in sheets that they've given you every day, and you can help them develop a topic based on some of the questions that you've asked them, in the event that they don't already know. So that's how I use the sign-in sheet combined with a seating chart. It is their seating chart. Go find your name. When you find your name, sit down and sign in. Seating 2020 is the name of the file that will be in that resources folder for you, and you're welcome to look at it. There's a README on the front of it to explain, you know, kind of how to use it. It's fully editable. Go for it. Change it up. Do whatever you got to do with it.
And that's really a great lead into sort of our next topic, really about just being flexible as a teacher, flexible ways of organizing your classroom, and what do typical days look like in Senior Capstone. From my experience, this is something that definitely new teachers with Senior Capstone tend to struggle with, and honestly, the veterans too. I've been doing this since they started the course. I don't have every daily part of Capstone always figured out. Part of the problem that's sort of set is this course requires what I believe is a certain sort of teacher mindset, because the manual really just gives us, here is where the students need to be at the end of their final semester in Capstone. And it's sort of left up to teacher creativity to organize this, to support kids through it at sort of their different ability levels and different interests and very different activities on a different day. So this takes a certain teacher mindset of, you're going to have to build out part of the rest of this course for what really works for your building. The teachers who just give the students the manual or just give them a daily goal and sit down and say, hey, ask me if you need help, they're not going to be really successful with Senior Capstone. There's a lot of things in this course that are hard for our kids that they've not had a lot of skills built up to in previous courses, and maybe they should have. Early in my Capstone career, it was easy for me to say a 17-year-old should be able to do this, an 18-year-old should be able to do this. Well, they always can't, and many of our students are not used to working at such long time frames some of the time, and they need a lot of structure built in. So here are a few things that helped me, and Michelle, please chime in. On most of the days, the kids come in Senior Capstone, particularly if I think at any point they'll be doing some various individual work on their needs as compared to whole class work. I give them an agenda sheet. You can see one here last year. This was my very difficult 4B class last year. And I'm just being open, honest. Yeah, I have hard classes too that are tough to deal with. This was a pretty low achieving group. It was a struggle most of the year. But they come in, they can immediately see up top, everybody, here is the number one thing you have to make sure you have done. We have to finish the resume tabs. I used a Microsoft OneNote notebook last year to organize the portfolio. In the realm of things that don't work, I won't be trying that again because it is so incredibly slow on school Wi-Fi and logging in. It takes the kids 10 minutes minimum on my classroom computer, sometimes longer, to reach it. Going through all the logins. Then you can see I'm having them, when you're done, I give them some options. And so here are some things to do. And for me, that's a lot of where the hours fill in. A lot of my kids don't have cars. I know we talked more about the hours in the portfolio module, but I try to give them things the kids can do in class to try to gain capstone hours. That might be extra reading on their topic. That might be interviewing something in a career. That might be finding places to do community service. But that sort of tells all the kids, hey, here's the expectation. The kid's like, I don't know what to do. Look at your agenda sheet. I don't know what I need to do. Look at your agenda sheet.
I do the same thing, Jason, only I do it on Schoology. Go to the plan for today. The plan every day on Schoology. Go look at it.
Some of you may end up in situations like me where I have different academies inside one capstone class. I have both our IB Academy, which has a certain curriculum plan. Their research paper is much longer and on a longer time frame than the career academies. This can also allow to split up your class into groups, give them different, and so you can start differentiating the instructions. At one point, I know if you've already been through Module 3 and looked what I talked about with the newspaper project, I would have students come in and I would have IB Academy group, Career Academy group doing the newspaper project, Career Academy group doing this other activity. And you can really get into some kind of high-level differentiation stuff by sort of coming and saying, hey, you're on this team, you got a team. Here's what you need to focus on today. And it kind of helps everybody accountable. Is it perfect? No way. It's not perfect at all. Does it help? Yes, it helps a great deal. I use it for makeup work too. This is again for my very struggling class last year. I mean, I had 2 A-day classes that were pretty high achieving. Then I had a B-day class, and I want to show you the ugly as well as the beautiful. So this is something I've found that helped them a lot. Because many of them were struggling with, hey, we're working on different things, or it wasn't a class structure they were used to. They would come in, and when I needed them to kind of, if I noticed they were falling behind, and many of them fell behind in most of their classes, I would say, hey, so I looked at your portfolio, here's where you are. If you're in Group A, you're either brand new to the class, because I have kids transferring in and out all the time. I'm like, here's what you need to do. This is what's most important, and you prioritize it for the kids. Group B, here's where you are. Group C, here's where you are. And you can see I had a lot of this group that had been in the class. They were more than 2 weeks behind. So they still had assignments, more than 4 to 5 classes that were out of date. And I was, this was a difficult thing. It took some time to put together, but I got a lot of makeup work, a lot of kids, they could look at that, and it was very helpful. And I might have shown that to a basketball coach or two, too, that list. And let's just say a lot of those A and B kids ended up in Group C in about 48 hours, which is where you want to be. So this is another way, gets a daily agenda sheet, can help. I've seen teachers make data walls on whiteboards if you have that kind of space available. Like, here's all my kids, here's what you need on your portfolio, sort of built out like that. Having something where kids can always sort of assess their progress towards their end goal is useful. Another thing I do, particularly if I have set up class structure for the day where 45 minutes, we have about 85-minute blocks. Most of our zoned high schools have something close to that. If half the class, the more is I'm assigning the kids to go work on their project, particularly if many of them are doing very different things. I give them this towards the end of class, and this becomes a way for me to gauge what they're doing. That's the entire form. I pushed it up some just so it was all visible on the PowerPoint. For the kids to self-assess themselves and report out to me, here's what I've worked on. If you have if you could even use the 1 through 6 scale as a sort of formative assessment. If you have a lot of high trust in them, I do that sometimes. If nothing else, this particularly that question 5 tells me what I need to focus on. And then this is something I use. This will be in the resource folder. When usually over half the class time is dedicated to the students doing individual work on their projects, less teacher instruction or group instruction.
I use this as an exit ticket all the time.
Mm-hmm. For me, just to give sort of a guideline, I mean, I think as a teacher, you're going to have to teach in this class, and the capstone, it's most of the kids are not going to find their own pathway there to success. There will be those high achievers, but for me, they're the exception. And during class, I'm typically doing one of 4 things or a mix of them. I'm either doing whole class teaching, I'm either working with rotating groups, like you saw that somewhat with the ABC makeup group structure. The third bullet point is what I'm doing the most, which is just walking around class and helping kids with their projects and answering questions. If there's a lot of questions, I'll have like a request list up on the board. The kids can put their name up there. I'll see them in that order, sometimes to manage that. My classroom is sort of built into like 6 table pods, and I just walk around from table to table on a rotation, like a dog chasing his tail. But I get a lot of teaching done that way. The fourth thing I do sometimes, it's difficult when I have very large classes, and I usually have very large classes, is I try to do occasional one-on-one conferences with kids who need review or additional support. This goes beyond me just walking around and taking 1 to 2 minutes to help you with a project. I do more than these, but these are almost guaranteed every year what I do every year. I have a conference with you between your rough draft brag sheet and your final brag sheet. We have one conference before the final draft of the resume. One conference when you have 10 sources and you're making your annotated bibliography. Mm-hmm. Usually the capstone paper involves two conferences some way. That may add or shrink a little based on a student's individual plan. And usually one conference using the late 3rd quarter, early 4th quarter over your draft PowerPoint, because I want that to look spanking beautiful. And then I add in other things as I can. Some kids need lots of conferences over internships. Some will just need to bounce off some product ideas. You add things in there as you do, and I try to build in some time for that.
Let me say this. Mm-hmm. Jason and I have built this stuff out more or less separately, but that is exactly how it works for me too. The list of things that he ends up conferencing over. And it sounds like a hard thing to do, but it's really not. It's sort of haphazard, and I have a checklist, and I check off all the kids I have to meet with. Like, it's an emergency before they go any further, and then I meet with the next group, and I make sure that I meet with everybody. But it does work out over time. It really does. It's an excellent way to do it.
So we've introduced this a bit. Let's talk about some best grading practices that Michelle and I use. Once again, so we're going to show you and talk about some tips and tricks that sort of help student achievement. None of these are mandatory in the manual. They are things that have been at various points signed off by directors and people here in the district. One of the things that helps me a lot is something that I call persistent grading. And that doesn't mean that I'm grading all the time. It means, though, I feel like that sometimes. That's because I'm an English teacher, though. The grades themselves are persistent. And so think about it, it's meant to solve a couple problems. One, the ultimate achievement in this class is supposed to be based on the students really finishing a project and less around the four quarters element of a standard MNPS course structure. The four quarter structure creates some problems, I think, for some of my more reluctant students. I'll have kids, when we start the resume in the first quarter, tell me, this is too much work. I'm just going to take a 50. I'm just going to take a 50%. Now, of course, we can say very relevant things like, show them how the resume is connected to real life and how it could be useful to them. Sure, but the problem is the standard grading structure pushes back against that. What happens if a research paper is a large part of element of this course? I can have kids in the second quarter say, I'm just not going to do the paper. I'm just going to take an F, and I'm going to try to balance it out with other things around all the other quarters. This is too hard. I'm going to fail this. I'm going to try to beat the average somewhere else. Well, capstone's not supposed to work like that. You're supposed to finish the whole project, and persistent grading helps me do that. And it's something I tell the students about up on the front end, and it has certain benefits for them as well. You'll have this in the resource folder, but I did want to kind of throw it up here on the PowerPoint. So for example, so here might be my first quarter. This is not my complete grade book. This is an example. So let's say we have a student, they get an 80% on the resume in the first quarter. They get to keep that grade in the subsequent quarters. I put a resume for these portfolio, for that portfolio item in all the other quarters, but as I push it forward, I drop the weight by half. So the things going on in that still quarter aren't overweighted by those things. And it matters. What does that mean for the kids? That means if they do a good job on a portfolio item that's going to be pushed forward, they get to keep the benefit of that positive grade. That portfolio item still matters. That resume is just as important in the fourth quarter as it is in the first. I need them to have a good resume in the fourth quarter. They need to have a good resume in the fourth quarter. The benefit for the kids is this kid who's gotten an 80 out of 100, I will at any point let them revise that resume and look at the feedback and fix that and fix that grade pushed forward. You might ask me, Prophet, how are you not overswamped doing grades all the time? Well, you be honest, fewer kids take me up on this than you might think. The same time, if they're missing something, like that student who is getting no credit for the resume in the first quarter, they have a grade now in the second quarter where they have no credit for the resume. And that's still a deficiency. That still needs to be fixed. That's still that student's responsibility. I am not satisfied with them taking a 50%. This is something that needs to be addressed. You can see from part of this, like the annotated bibliography in the first quarter, I don't do this with every single one of my grades, usually the major stuff for the portfolio. And so this is sort of a section that keeps growing. I'm going to show a bit of this. This is a third quarter look at just summer grades. This isn't the whole campus from what I had in spring 2019. You can see, if you look on the right side, you see there are several items that have sort of that subcategory of portfolio items from previous quarters. You see the final brag sheet. It's usually 20 points for me. It's been weighted down to 10. You see the resume. You still see the original grade out of 100, but there's a multiplier on there to make it 50%. You see the 2 letters of recommendation. Those are things we typically do in the first quarter, but here they are in the third, and they've been weighted down. You see the summative items over there. You're seeing their capstone hours for what they've done progressively so far. And those are being weighted more fully because I focus a lot on those third quarter. In reality, for me, I let the kids get capstone hours whenever. They always have this scale of 1 to 50 in 5-hour increments that they can always fill in to get grades. And when they reach near the end of the fourth quarter, I fill those in with zeros if the kids are behind. You notice that 40 are required for the kids in the portfolio. I will continue grading them up to 60 hours. For fact, kids doing a lot of internships, just really to keep them being involved and to keep doing them something. But I'll only, if they're missing behind, I'd only grade them up through 40. This is also how, I mean, I just encourage them to keep being involved, and they can always see their progress with their hours. Because I check these every Tuesday. I have them submit hours on a Google form, and they get put input like that. And this is how I grade them every 5 hours. What you can't see here is if any of you are campus mathematical wizards and want to play with this, you could. I use the multiplier settings in Campus. The front 20, 25 hours are weighted much more highly than the back 10, 15. I do this so if a kid has only, if a kid only gets 35 out of 40 hours, they're getting like a B for the hours, which is far more appropriate than actually taking 35 and dividing it by 40, and just encourages them to keep going. I thought I would just show this too. This is what my category list for Capstone looks like in Campus. There's formative, the district's required homework, portfolio items from previous quarters, and summative items. In later, particularly last year, I wouldn't use summative, and so the percentages would balance out better. I would say project work in the current quarter. And just so the kids see all those labels if I print out a progress report for them, and it just sort of lets them know where they are. And it's sort of just in full transparency here, as far as my students' achievements, these are the trends that I tend to see. And I think in some ways it's sobering, but in some ways it's just being pragmatically sometimes realistic. 1/3 of my kids usually tend to start the project and maintain a fairly adequate pace. I'm not saying they don't miss days. I'm not saying they don't occasionally have trouble. Capstone starts from a place of mess. You build a project out of that. But I see 1/3 of my students going through a daily, at least focus on their project. That doesn't mean they're all necessarily making A's. Some of their achievement will vary, but they're going through the struggle of building a capstone project. Usually 1/3 of my students will engage for a couple days, but they'll tend to start lagging behind, and many of their classes they're used to lagging behind. But they will, as they see that first group have success, that'll give them a little sort of peer cues into what they need to be doing, and they'll kind of start following along, and they tend to stay 2 weeks behind the first group. That's where the agendas help. 1/3 of my students tend to fall more than 2 risks behind. There may be serial absenteeism here. There may be general low achievement. There'll be many of those things that get in our way of our students being successful. It may be reluctance because to poor academic skills, not believing they can do it. They may just not like my sarcasm. A lot of people don't. And they'll typically become at risk for failing the semester. I do lots of interventions to help these kids. But one of the things that helps me most is in December, I put the kids on a grade contract. Usually kids failing for me have not completed a research paper. If they usually get it done in the first week and a half, when they come back in January, I call their parents. I tell them, hey, your kid used my class as a break. I need them to use their break for my class. If they come back, all is forgiven. Capstone is a place of mess. Anybody else, however, beyond that, as part of my grade contracts, I make a deal with my kids. If I get a completed project in May, all elements in there, and your grade on that is higher than what you got in the fall semester, I'll go back and change your grade. I have to do it a lot less than you might think. Because usually by that point, that's usually half that third they kind of recover using the grade contracts. And there's usually 10 to 15% of the kids who I struggle to get back. I have had some, last year I had kind of had the first group that I could ever, that failure rate, put a 2 in front of. I have had it go lower than 9, but 9 to 15% is usually a rate. Not being at school is usually a major trend with that group right there. And most of my kids failing capstone usually have a couple other failures on their school schedule around, and we're talking about them in the academy and trying to help. Michelle, you want to add anything about grading?
I would add only that there have been so many people, I don't know, at Overton, I'm sure at different places it's the same, but we've had quite a few people coming in and out of capstone at Overton. The first time that I ever had it, I asked my AP who did scheduling, can I please just have all capstone? because it's really right up my alley. And I didn't even know it. I didn't even realize it, but it was. And we've had so many people come through and just absolutely detest it. People who, like, I would describe it to them and tell them what it was, and they'd be like, wow, that sounds great. And I think that maybe they weren't prepared for the mess that is Capstone. Jason probably would agree with that assessment. And
yeah.
I'll tell you that knowing this is what it's supposed to look like. I had a veteran English teacher who I absolutely adored, who took 3 sections of Capstone when our Capstone teacher got moved to a different academy and a different teaching assignment. And I thought, boy, they won't wear her down. She was absolutely miserable. She was at my doorway in tears because this is hard. And she was considering herself a failure because only 1/3 of her students were maintaining a pace through this thing. You know, 1/3 of her students weren't doing anything. They were not doing visibly anything. And I had to explain to her, that's what it looks like. It's okay. Mm-hmm. You know? So this is real life. This isn't like, oh, I can do better. Don't think, oh, there's no way I'm gonna do that badly with these kids, and then set yourself up for disappointment.
You're gonna have kids.
You're going
struggle.
to have these groups that will perform differently and with different levels of enthusiasm. But they will all get on board to their ability if they trust you. And you can't beat yourself up because of the 1/3 or the 2/3. You just can't do that. If you do that, you're going to be miserable.
I think acceptance of that, I think, for teacher can start making Capstone fun, because you really start appreciating those successes that are there. I think as a teaching perspective and just sort of teaching morale, it does take a certain personality to sort of approach this. Like, you have to say things like, you don't necessarily have a curriculum handed to you. You know, your assessment plans, you get to make up. There is no textbook. When they approached me with that, I remember back in 2013, we were thinking about this. I was like, oh, wow, this sounds cool. I still think I have these 3 groups. I'm telling you about my struggling groups. You all saw my makeup list. I still think this class is cool. And it can be a lot of fun to teach and for students to be. And even sometimes my really struggling kids can get a certain achievement by what they've done. To think of it from their perspective, most of our students are used to a teacher gives notes, I do a little work, I take a test. I then don't have to remember that information for very much longer. Teacher gives notes, I do a little work, I take a test. The kids are going to struggle when they are pushed out of their norm and made to design what they are doing, and that information being very available long term. How could they not struggle? And that's something as teachers, I think that we just sort of have to prepare for and accept. But the students are designing their own work. They're doing authentic things built on their own interest, and it's rigorous. And they're planning and they're developing both work skills and interest skills and growing knowledge. And I don't know about you all, that's what I'm here for as a teacher.
Watching them realize that accomplishment at the end of presentation month, in my case, is phenomenal. The day that all of it's done, they could climb a mountain. They're so proud of themselves, and they didn't even see it coming. It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
And I think partially, and this is, again, just Jason on his soapbox here, you know, the problems we sometimes see in Capstone, the course itself, we're always working on it. We look at changing it a bit every year, is we have to get our students ready to do authentic work. And that needs to be some of the conversations in our academies. Why do these kids have so much time planning a project? And why are they reaching 12th grade sometimes without writing a long paper? And those are some conversations as professional educators we probably need to have, though this is not the time and place. So we move into our final piece, Michelle.
Yes. Professionalism. This whole course, you might say, the purpose of Capstone is to develop these professionalism behaviors, not only in work, but in interpersonal relationships, in what is designed and what is presented for public view, to care about what it looks like and what is happening around you. The MNPS professionalism rubric that everybody uses, you can take that, you can modify it. I'll send you a couple of modifications that I've done. It just depends on the kids that I have as to what I think maybe something needs to be combined and then something else included in there for a little focus area. But you really need to push the idea of professionalism. And of course, how do we push ideas with high school seniors? We make it part of their grade. I have them self-rate them. I have them self-rating on professionalism. I rate them. Sometimes I have them self-rate off of the rubric in writing. They send it to Schoology. I make it gradable, and I either agree with them or I, excuse me, increase what they have said, because a lot of times they're just too hard on themselves. Some of them are. So they get 2 grades. They get a self-assessment and an assessment from me. Yeah, your grade book's going to look crazy a lot of the times. There's going to be a lot of stuff in it, but it's okay. You know, all of that, the advanced stuff that you've got from Jason, like if you're going to do that grading and you're going to count all those things over and over and over again, you can put that all in there on day 1, right? And then you can add in professionalism. I try very hard to do a professionalism every other week. It doesn't always come out every other week, but they know it's coming. They know there's always one coming up. Capstone is a place for time management, problem solving, attention to detail, teamwork, and mutual respect. These are things, look at that list of things. That's not something that they've ever had to actually do in one place at one time. It's not something they're accustomed to doing. So it does take a little bit of time. And the more structured you are about it, the more professionalism you're going to see out of your seniors. And this is coming from the middle school teacher in me, because I did 18 years in middle school. But I'm going to tell you, there was something that happened from 7th grade in that summer after 7th grade before they got to me in the 8th grade, which is what I did for 18 years. There was something about the difference between a 7th grader and an 8th grader. It was like a miracle. It was like a whole nother kid came in, right? That's kind of what I see happening with a good half of my kids. I see that happen over winter break.
Well said.
They're just like dragging themselves along through this paper. They've had it. They're done. They're, oh gosh, I can't believe I finished. I'm so glad I'm done. And they just are whining and complaining about it still to the very last moment. But when they come back in January and I say, wow, this is the last semester of mandated school you will ever have. And they go, whoa. And something happens to them and they change and they are a whole nother person. And they are into college applications, some of them, Tennessee Promise applications, want to know when that meeting is. What do I have to do? How many hours do I need? Can I use my capstone hours for Tennessee Promise? They all of a sudden go, oh boy, the world's waiting for me and I got to get there. But see, they've already got all of this. They've already got a foundation from Capstone for like taking responsibility, which is all those 4 things are. So that's my favorite part of it. And then when they have to put together a presentation and a portfolio and they have to gather evidence of what they are doing, then that just makes things a lot more solid. And sometimes there are tears on presentation day. I mean, truly happy tears, and the responses that I get from them, Let me say this, the last document that I have them put in their portfolios is an extra document. It's not something that's necessarily required, but I have them reflect over the whole experience with a certain set of questions. I'll put that in the folder for you guys. Once they have finished, I give them a small bottle of water and their choice of a bag of potato chips. And they have a snack and a water, and they sit down at a laptop and they answer those 4 questions, save it as a PDF, and put it in their live binder before they leave the room. And I want them to do that because I want them to reflect the minute that they have finished, because you get the most honest, positive, upbeat thoughts out of them in that moment. Many of them, if they wait a day or two, they won't remember how that felt. If you make them do it right then, when they have finished this thing that has encompassed their life for a year, you'll get some good stuff. Maybe I'll put some of my good stuff together and I'll put it in that folder so you guys can read it. You need to see it.
She will definitely do that. She's definitely going to do that.
Yes.
All right. Our next to last slide, we have, since most of you are probably on Schoology right now, if you're viewing this in summer 2020, there is also a Schoology group district-wide for Senior Capstone. There is the join code. We encourage you to come and join us, ask questions if you need help. There's resources in there. There's community.
Contribute your great ideas to that.
Please do. Come and join us on the Schoology group on Senior Capstone. All are welcome. And that, if you've reached the end, here's the, you've reached the end of Module 6. And if so, you only have the final homework assignment left. Remember, be sure to check out the resource folder for Schoology for more helps. And I wish you all an amazing year with Senior Capstone.
Here's hoping we get there. I hope you guys have a wonderful year. And please contact either of us anytime that you need anything.
Michelle and I, particularly here through 2020, through the end of 2021, perhaps beyond, we've been here a while, are here to help and be a support for Capstone teachers.
Exactly. We love it. We really do.
I hope you have all come to enjoy this as much as I have. And so we wish you the best of your teaching Capstone.
Yay.